Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much again for joining on a Friday to go over the BioBlitz overview webinar, which I am so excited about. I want to say a huge thank you to Climate Impact and Ontario Trillium Foundation for making this BioBlitz possible, as well as the previous BioBlitz in the fall. And through these BioBlitzes, we built a better understanding of the impacts climate change has on our biodiversity and our populations, and for future years to come too, so that we can refer back to those images and observations that everybody posted. And a big thanks as well to our awesome board members that pledged $4 in total for every species seen throughout the month. There will be more observations coming on our social media pages about this, so stay tuned for more information. And just wanted to let you all know that our June schedule went live a couple days ago, so you can check that out as well at the riverwoodconservancy.org/events. We have some really cool programs coming up, including evening talks inside of Chapel House. We have forest bathing coming back again in English, Cantonese, and Mandarin. We have astronomy night and yoga events for adults and seniors. So please check out the June schedule before it fills up. And the Riverwood Conservancy would like to acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, Wendat, and Haudenosaunee nations. Today, this place is still home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to not only live but work on this land. And I also wanted to say a huge thanks to all of you who made this possible. We couldn't have done it without the support from all of our community members and our participants from our programs. It was just a really fun year of doing these BioBlitzes. It was just so enjoyable to see everyone get really involved in it and excited about it. So from October 2021 to May 15th, 2022, we hosted programs and BioBlitzes that were focused on understanding the biodiversity of Riverwood. We don't really have a whole lot of data specifically to do with Riverwood. We have some previous Excel sheets and data like that of species lists, but we've never kind of pared it down to specific seasons and had people go out consistently throughout the day to look at what's out there. So this is really exciting that we have this newfound data that we can add to our species list. And ultimately, the focus of this whole project was to understand the impacts that climate change has on our populations. So we can not only cross-reference what we found in these two BioBlitzes that we hosted with previous species lists that we had for Riverwood, but also in the future years, if we want to look back and say, hey, I saw a green frog on this date and now there's no green frogs at Riverwood, that may be a signal that something's happening to our environment. So it's really, really important data that our community kind of came together and created, and hopefully we will protect nature by doing stuff like this. Some of the programs that we did throughout the fall and the spring, fungi walks, I know that was a huge one. Everyone loved that. And fungi was a huge hit in our fall BioBlitz as well. Macroinvertebrate programs in the Credit River, macroinverts or little tiny insects in the Credit River are a huge signal of the impact of climate change, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. We have birding groups, frog monitoring. Frog monitoring was one of my favorite nights. We just stood out there in silence and listened to what frogs and toads are singing. And we also got to hear coyotes singing too. So that was a lot of fun. And wildflowers and trees and much, much more. So it has been very enjoyable. And thank you everyone who came out to the programs. And if you didn't come out, but you came out to BioBlitz on your own time, thank you. That was greatly appreciated. And just to let you know, this webinar will be a little bit shorter than usual. I always say that, but then I just do not stop talking. So we'll see how long this goes, but I think it should be a little bit shorter than usual. We're just going to do a quick overview of what we found, some of the cool species, and then we'll get to prizes and announcements. So here are the final statistics for our two BioBlitzes. In the fall, we had over 1,500 observations. So the observation is every single image that was added to the BioBlitz. There were over 1,500, which is insane. We had 506 species seen, a lot of which were fungi, which is kind of cool. And then in the fall, we had 41 community members or participants that took part in the BioBlitz. So we greatly appreciated that. And then the Spring BioBlitz that just ended on May 15th, it went from April 15th to May 15th. We did really great. We got even more, actually over 1,000 more observations. So 2,600 observations. 530 species is our final number for the BioBlitz, which went above and beyond. Our goal was 500 and we hit 530. So thank you everyone for making that possible. And we got 78 participants. 78 people came out to Riverwood and contributed to the BioBlitz, which is a lot of people. That's nearly 100 people that got involved, got on iNaturalist, maybe never had iNaturalist or didn't even think about getting it. So it's a big deal. In total, that makes out to 119 people that have joined both of the BioBlitzes and over 4,100 observations of different animals. So 4,000 observations that we can use to understand the biodiversity at Riverwood for future years to come, which is amazing. So I will be going through some of the most observed species, the least observed species, and then some threatened species as well that we saw. If you did join the BioBlitz, if you don't mind commenting in the chat what one of your favorite species you saw throughout the BioBlitz, that would be really great. If you did contribute, I'd love to know what nature you saw that you were super excited about. I know a lot of people were excited about the birds coming this spring, but in the fall, it was usually the fungi that people were pretty excited about. So here are the top 10 most common species to be added to the BioBlitz in the fall. And this is the one that people took the most images of. So as you can see, turkey tail, the fungi, was #1. If you walked at Riverwood in the fall, you would have seen this fungi all over the place. It was littering the ground. So it was pretty cool that that was #1 on the list. Then you have the chipmunk, of course, getting ready for hibernation. The sugar maple, which was bright and beautiful and red during that time. So that was one that a lot of people were taking pictures of. Of course, our common bird species, and then also some of our fall species for plants, like our goldenrod, broadleaf goldenrod starts to bloom in the fall. So that's a common plant that people notified, and then also wild teasel. So both of these plants are really, really great plants for our pollinators. That being said, the teasel is invasive, but it does still offer some sort of nectar. And knowing what invasive species are at Riverwood, where they are, where there's populations, how abundant they are is really important too, because if there's an invasive species up in the top 10, that may notify us that something might be wrong in the environment, right? So that's pretty good data as well. And then if you want to compare it to the Spring BioBlitz most observed species, I just love comparing those two and seeing the differences in what species you can see and what times of years all these animals are out. So we have the red-winged blackbird coming in first, the most observed species throughout the BioBlitz in the springtime. It's really the mascot of spring birds. It's the first bird to migrate back to Riverwood, and it is extremely loud. So I think a lot of people saw it. They're not too scared by humans either. So if you had a cell phone, you likely were able to take a picture of a red-winged blackbird. Also some of our common bird species, of course, bloodroot, which is an awesome one. It is a spring ephemeral and it lasts for a very short period of time in the springtime. So there was only a portion of the BioBlitz that you could actually see the bloodroot flowers, which is really cool that it got up in the top 5 actually observed species throughout the BioBlitz. And then something interesting to notice is 35 observations of white-tailed deer. And that's a lot of observations compared to you don't even see them on the leaderboard in the fall. So it's cool to compare fall to spring and understand kind of the different movements and activities of our wildlife depending on what season it is too, which is awesome. So yes, the deer were very active. They were everywhere. And I'm sure if you went out one day every day this week, you'd probably see them 2 or 3 days a week. And then also the least observed species. So these are also super important to report on. Many people may not notice these when they're walking down the trails at Riverwood. These are usually kind of the big standout species: birds, mammals, very beautiful, brightly colored flowers, sometimes insects, but as you can see, they're the bigger animals. The least observed species are usually the ones that people don't notice when they go on their walk. So all of these species got one observation on the BioBlitz. So these are in the fall, and it's great to report them. It's a great reporting system, because if we don't report these species, how will scientists know where they are in the world if they're just not being observed, right? So it's really important to observe these things so scientists can see maybe there's 1 or 2 observations in Mississauga. Maybe there's a population there that I don't know about, which is really interesting. And then compared to the Spring BioBlitz, these were the least observed species throughout the springtime. Again, we have a lot of insects, plants, fungi, small things like that. We have 1 Nashville warbler. But yeah, it's usually the smaller things that people don't usually add to their BioBlitz, and it's very important to add those on our species list as well. And then we also got a lot of threatened species. Actually, both on fall and spring BioBlitz, we got 13 in total. And threatened species is basically any species which is likely to become an endangered species within the foreseeable future, either within a significant portion of its range or in its total range. So many of you may be wondering, why is common grackle up there? Because you can go outside right now and probably see a common grackle, but threatened species does not necessarily mean that it's threatened at Riverwood specifically. It could mean that somewhere in the world it is threatened, or it's experiencing habitat loss, or it's being impacted by climate change, things like that. So it could be threatened in different locations around the world or globally. So common grackle, it is not threatened in Ontario or in Riverwood, but in the US it is quite imperiled. So it is quite threatened there. Great one, of course, the monarch butterfly, which is absolutely a vulnerable species in Canada, imperiled in many provinces, including Ontario, but it is kind of making a comeback from what I understand. Slight improvement in recent years, and that's due to community people, community scientists that care about the monarch butterfly. I went to purchase common milkweed the other day from one of the greenhouses that I go to, and it was all sold out. They had just got a shipment of all of their native wildflowers, and common milkweed was completely sold out. The staff members said that they basically just picked up trays of them and just bought like 50 of them at a time. So people really love monarch butterflies, and you can see that there is an impact when people come together in things like a BioBlitz to kind of protect our wildlife for future years. And then compared to our spring BioBlitz, our threatened species that we recorded, again, top one is red-bellied woodpecker. It has secure populations in Ontario, so it's doing fine in Ontario, and you may already know that. This is actually a pretty common woodpecker to see at Riverwood, which is awesome. It's beautiful. But in Manitoba and in Quebec, it's imperiled or vulnerable. It's not doing good whatsoever. Barn swallow is a great one. Barn swallows and many swallow species in general are threatened in Canada. Some provinces, them being imperiled. Again, that means that they've decreased so dramatically in recent years that they are at risk of extinction in certain locations or in their entire range. So barn swallow is a really important one. And they're doing pretty good at Riverwood. We do have populations that nest at Riverwood. You may have already seen them when you came to Riverwood, so it's pretty exciting. The common snapping turtle, it is a special concern in Canada and vulnerable in many provinces, meaning they could become endangered. Turtles in general are low in population. So to have one observation of a snapping turtle is great. And then also things like trees. We have the Kentucky coffee tree, which is imperiled in Ontario, basically meaning that it is at risk of extinction. And that is because Kentucky coffee tree is a very niche species of tree that lives in Carolinian zones. And Carolinian zones basically take up the greater GTA area. And a lot of the greater GTA area has been developed. So a lot of our Carolinian species that used to be here are no longer here. So just by observing our threatened species as well, now we have a list of species that we know are struggling, maybe at Riverwood, maybe in Ontario, maybe in Canada, maybe globally. And now in future years, we can go back and say, hey, I remember we observed barn swallows, or we observed butternut trees, and now they're no longer here, or maybe they're high in populations. So you can kind of distinguish if they're getting better, those populations are increasing, or getting worse due to different human-induced reasons. We also collected some valuable data about two different kinds of species. One is a keystone species and the other is an indicator species. And a keystone species is a species that the entire ecosystem largely depends on. So if they were removed from the ecosystem or they disappeared for any reason, that whole ecosystem, all of those species that live within that ecosystem would basically either fail or completely change. So a great example of it is a beaver, which I know many of you saw our friend, the beaver at Riverwood. Maybe you saw the signs of a beaver at Riverwood. It is a great example because beavers are ecosystem engineers. And that basically means they're just like us humans. They make their own habitat. They can even make their own food. They don't really know they're making their own food, but they do, and their own shelter. And when they build this wetland habitat, they dam up a river or a stream, they flood this area. It will kill back trees, and dead trees create houses for all sorts of different species of birds and insects and things like that. It will offer a shelter for many wetland animals. It offers food as well to many other animals. So a keystone species is one that basically, if it disappeared, a lot of the other things that live in that ecosystem would also disappear. They rely on it. So some examples of species that rely on our beaver would be like our belted kingfisher, our green frog, and our water lily, our native white water lily. So without the beaver, these species would have to either go somewhere else and find a new habitat to live in, or they wouldn't be as prominent at Riverwood any longer because that the beaver left. For whatever reasons, it could be climate change, it could be habitat loss, it could be multiple different reasons. The other one there is indicator species. And this is probably more important for understanding climate change. So an indicator species is one whose presence, so it being there, its absence, it not being there, or its well-being, so its overall health of the population in an ecosystem is actually a sign of overall health of the ecosystem. So a common one that's actually used at Riverwood is within the Credit River. Whenever the water quality is poor, you'll find more species that are resistant to things like pollution or climate change in the water. When the water quality is good, you'll have more sensitive native species that you'll find in the river. Another indicator species is our salmon. So salmon are pretty sensitive to fluctuations due to climate change or pollution in their water, both in Lake Ontario or within their migratory river that they migrate up and breed in. So another indicator species could be a salmon in the Credit River. This example is actually a spotted salamander, and they're an indicator species because they're very, very sensitive. So many amphibians are usually the first impacted by climate change in our ecosystems, climate change or pollution. And it's basically because they breathe with their skin. They are very sensitive to things like pollution in their water. They usually either live in the water or underground. And their babies are usually born in water as well. So climate change and pollution usually impacts water pretty heavily. And so our amphibian species are usually the ones impacted first. So frogs and salamanders, they're at great decline globally, which I'm sure you already know. But at Riverwood, seeing something like a spotted salamander, which I think we may have 1 or 2 observations in total. We had many observations of the terrestrial salamander, the redback salamander, but the spotted salamander, not so much. So an indicator species is the spotted salamander. So in 10, 15 years, if they're no longer here, that's a pretty good signal that there's something wrong, right? So these are some cool species that we saw during the BioBlitz too. So iNaturalist's overall mission was to connect people to nature and advance biodiversity science and conservation. So many people told me that they had never really wondered or thought about what was around them. They never thought about the bird songs, what species was singing. They never thought about the plants filling the forest, like all of the little tiny green leaves that you see on the forest floor. They never thought about the insects that were zooming past their head. And some people said that the BioBlitz really opened the door to them, that so many people that are now really, really keen and know a whole lot about the species at Riverwood and in their backyards as well. I just love hearing the stories of people that they just have excelled now and know so much about the species at Riverwood. They can identify so many different birds and plants and insects, and it's just great having kind of like a community that had a lot of fun doing it, but also learned a lot too, and can spread that knowledge onto other people. But the overall thing was to contribute important data to protecting species, understanding how they are impacted by climate change and other human-induced impacts, and hopefully how to understand how to support them for future generations. So in 50 years from now, this data will always be around, and we can go back in 50 years and say, this is what we saw then. Is it any different to what we're seeing now? Which is pretty cool. So that's a little bit of the overview of the BioBlitz and all of the exciting data and statistics that we got. I know this is the most exciting part though, and it's the winners and the prizes. So first we have the randomly selected prize. So anyone that got involved in the BioBlitz throughout the month of, throughout the month, April 15th to May 15th, had a chance of winning this. This is a Baltimore Oriole feeder. And I don't know, I think a lot of you saw the Baltimore Orioles come in to Riverwood in the past week or two. They are all over the place. They're very, very loud as well. So you can put this in your backyard and feed some Baltimore Orioles. We have actually notified the person that won this prize on iNaturalist. We will give them about a week to respond. And then if they do not respond, we will spin for a new person as well. So we won't announce it quite yet, but we will announce it in a week or two. And then this one was most species observation. So the person that saw the most species, the most biodiversity throughout April 15th to May 15th, they won a big bag of Armstrong bird seed, a seed scooper, which is very, very helpful, and also a bird feeder, a really nice bird feeder as well that is great for all sorts of different birds, chickadees, goldfinches, cardinals, indigo buntings, which are also back as well. This one was a very tight race, and it actually came down to today. Me and a couple staff members have gone through the observations, the many observations, and we are trying to kind of ensure that the data is correct. So before we kind of announced a winner, a final winner. So it came down to 3 individuals that were very close in numbers. I think it was like a difference of 10 between the 10 species. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and trying so hard and observing so many things. But we do have a winner. So I'm very excited to announce that VC Bull has won for the most species observations for our Spring BioBlitz. So congratulations, VC Bull. I did send you a message on iNaturalist, so check that out. And this is actually one of Vi's last images. It's of indigo bunting that she saw on site. And Vi had observed 647, so she uploaded 647 images. She saw 209 species, and 156 of them are currently research grade. So research grade means that somebody else in the world has said, yes, that species is correct. That is an indigo bunting, for example. And now scientists can actually use those species for research, which is really awesome. 156 of them are. And even more impressive, VC Bull came out 24 days of the 30 days of BioBlitz. 24, which is such a commitment, and really exciting that we have a community that is that excited about getting out there and seeing some species. So 24 days of coming to Riverwood. Thank you so much, BC Bull, for everything you did and everyone that got involved. Our next prize was for best photograph. So the person with the best photograph got a signed copy of Dave's Predators of North America book. We thought it was pretty relevant because this book is all of Dave's photography of major predators in North America, which is pretty cool. This was really hard to decide. I'm going to tell you that. Everyone had amazing photos. So what we did is throughout the BioBlitz, we created a folder of images that we all loved, all the staff loved. And we sent that folder to Dave Taylor, the author of this book. And Dave looked through all the images and he brought it down to a final 6 that he felt were exceptional, really, really great photos. And then after he pared it down to 6 photos, those 6 images were then given to the Riverwood Conservancy's volunteer committee, who we greatly appreciate for doing this, and they picked the final winner. So the volunteer committee voted for the finalist, but let's go through the top 6 just to show you, and then we'll announce the winner after that. So one of the top 6 was the bull jumping spider by Tester. I don't know how to say that, sorry. I know it's Terrence Tester. So this is the bull jumping spider, beautiful image, very good macro image. The yellow trout lilies by Merganser 5, very vibrant colors, super beautiful. And you can see all these little beetles crawling all over it and pollinating it. The big brown bat also by Terrence, amazing photograph. This was a daytime flying brown bat that was caught, and it's just very unique that he captured the sunshine actually coming through the wings. We have a blue jay by Matt Hunter, also a very vibrant color. And this is just as spring was kind of showing its first signs. You see the little buds on the whatever tree this blue jay is sitting on. Downy woodpecker, also by Matt Hunter. And the volunteer committee called this guy their rock star because he had this big red mohawk on his head, which is pretty cool. He looks kind of angry or determined. Very nice photo. And then the last image that was in the top 6 was Red Squirrel and Squill by Ninja Frog. This is a really awesome photo as well. So these were our top 6 images. I wonder if anybody wants to say what their favorite is in the chat. If you're watching, feel free to comment what your favorite is before we announce the finalists. What I'll do is I'll announce the top 3, but unfortunately only the first place winner will get the prize, the book. Shadow says the bat. Shadow likes the bat the best by Terrence. That's awesome. Barbara says she likes the blue jay the best. It's a very nice photo as well. That's great. I don't know, it was very difficult to decide. So the volunteer committee had voted. In 3rd place, we had the big brown bat flying in the daytime by Tester. Sorry, I'm not doing very good with that. In 2nd place was the downy woodpecker by Matt Hunter. And in 1st place, the volunteer committee voted for the red squirrel and squill by Ninja Frog. So Ninja Frog, I love your name. I have reached out to you on iNaturalist with trying to contact you to give you a prize. So congratulations as well to Ninja Frog. What a great photo. And I think it really, it's a really good, significant photo for spring, right? Because you have all those purpley blue flowers in the background and you have a red squirrel getting ready for a long summer. So really great photo, but congratulations to everyone. There were some really exceptional photos this year. So that is it for me. It is a shorter one. I didn't talk too long. Thank you so much, everyone. I can't tell you how fun and exciting and promising it was to see you all out there, and the BioBlitz was just so enjoyable, and we couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. I know a lot of people say that, but honestly, we couldn't have. The data will last forever. And like I said, 50 years down the road, we can refer back to what Riverwood looked like in 2022 and compare it to what it looks like then. And that's pretty powerful information, and it was a lot of fun to collect it too. I always say that BioBlitzing is a lot like adult Pokemon. You go out and try to capture all of the species. So thank you everyone for protecting nature, caring about our wildlife, and Riverwood in general, and contributing to the bigger picture and all of the research that's being done by our wonderful wildlife scientists and naturalists out there. So thank you everyone for contributing, and I hope to see you at a future one, and I hope to see you at future programs as well. So thank you everyone for everything. Have a great weekend and enjoy the sunshine. Goodbye everyone.